Alright, so today we are going to be coloring this cute little Pikachu in honor of the upcoming movie. I've prepared a list of colors that we're going to use today. So we've got red 4, red 3, brown 5, neutral 3, brown 1, yellow 2, brown 4, yellow 3, neutral 4, blue 4, yellow 2, blue violet 2, blue 2, which you can't really see it very well, but it's really just for blending, and then BK number 4. We might use some other colors, but these are what we're going to start with. Okay. When I color, I always start with the eyes. I think it's easier. I'm a big fan of BL4, the cornflower blue, to get the right color in the eyes for the whites. Okay, so I'm going to just start by putting a little bit of shadow in the corners. You don't need a whole lot, just a little bit. And then we're going to go in with blue 2, which is our baby blue color that you don't really see very well, but it's really good at blending in that cornflower blue, so you get a more natural looking eye, because bright white eyes don't show up all that often. Okay, and then I might have blended a little more than we needed to, so I'm going to go and layer back in just a little bit more shadow. I color with a lot of different colors and I layer quite a bit, so don't be afraid to go back and forth between your colors when you start coloring. Okay, and then Pikachu has adorable brown eyes, so we're going to use a couple different colors here. We are going to use neutral 4, which is the caramel. And we're also going to use BR4, which is the burnt umber. Okay, so we're going to start with the caramel. We're going to put it in the color changing chamber. Usually with colors like this, I wait about 15 seconds to 20 seconds. So if you sing happy birthday in your head, that's about 20 seconds long. Or until you can noticeably see the color change, which we totally can. So I'm going to start towards the middle here. That's what I want to be the lightest part of my eye. And I'm going to color out to the sides. Okay, so again, I'm going to start towards the middle, color out to the sides. Right where we're creating our own natural highlight. Right in the middle. Now, it is optional when you're all done. I like to use white gel pens that you can pick up at any craft store, usually in the scrapbooking section. They stand out really well against these markers. You can go back and add more highlights to them. Now, the caramel is a great color to start with, but it does look a little reddish. So you don't want that to be like the only color that you use in your eyes, because it'll make him look a little scary. Okay, so that's kind of our base color. Then we're going to go in with the burnt umber, and we're going to darken it up and then go back in with the caramel and kind of blend a little bit. So I'm not going to use the color changing chamber just yet. I'm going to go through and I put my darkest shadows first, and then we'll go in and kind of blend them in so we get a soft gradation. Now with eyes, what I like to do is I like to outline the bottom of them and then pull a little bit up into the iris. It makes it look slightly more realistic, but I do have a very pop art kind of style, so a little bit of realism looks really great, but we don't have to make it super realistic. He's a really fun character. It's okay if he doesn't look super realistic. So I use the bullet nib to go in and put these fine details, and then we'll go and blend them in with the caramel later, and we can layer it as many times as we need to get the shades that we really want. I also like to go right around the pupil and darken it up just a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of plain black in drawings. It kind of deadens things a little bit, so places I've got these dark black areas, I'll throw a little bit of brown over. It just softens it up, especially next to the yellow that we're going to do in his fur. Yellow and black together is really kind of jarring for your eyes, so you don't want to do that super often. So then I'm going to go back in with my bullet nib and start kind of blending and layering these back to tone that down. So we can get that really pretty shade of brown for his eyes. Now, in this particular picture, we've got a spyglass here, which makes this part of his face look bigger. So this is going to be far more detailed than this eye would be anyway. So I'm taking a lot of care not to totally cover up my highlights here. I want to make sure that we can see some of that dimension. So we need to leave, you know, that light part there. And then we're going to go in and darken up the edges a little bit more. Like I said, I do lots of layering when I color. I think that's the best thing to do with markers. Start light, make it darker as you go. You can always make a color darker, but it's really hard to make it lighter. So I usually start with the lightest color and work my way to my darkest color until I get the shades that I want. I'm sorry if you can hear the meowing. My cat is very upset that she can't be in here, but the last time I made a video, she totally jumped up in the middle of it and knocked everything down. So she's a little grounded from the video area. I know that burnt umber is supposed to be a skin tone, but I love it as a brown. It's just a really rich, beautiful brown, and it's great for eyes. I mean, it's good for skin tones too, but I really like it for eyes. I also really like caramel for eyes, and it's supposed to be a skin color too, so. Now, if you get a little crazy with your coloring and you lose too much of your highlight, that's really what that white gel pen that I talked about is for. You can go back in and add those. Okay, so at this point, you just want to take a look, make sure that you're cool with the way the eyes look, and see if you need to go back in with any more shadows in the whites of the eyes. I'm going to put one right here towards the middle with that cornflower blue and darken it up just a little bit right there. Okay. And then I'm going to take the brown 5, the bark color, and I'm going to put a darker shadow right at the top of his eyes, just because his eyelid would naturally create a shadow there. And we're not going to worry about blending that in. We're just going to darken it up right there. That just gives it a little bit more dimension. Okay. So at this point, we're ready to start fur. Most of our fur is going to be done with the mellow yellow. So that is yellow number 2, mellow yellow. But I'm also going to use a little bit of yellow. Oh, interesting. These both have the same. Oh, but they're marked different. Okay, so yellow number 2, YO2 is mellow yellow, and then yellow number 2, summer sun, is YL2. I'm gonna use both of those, and we might use a little bit of yellow number 3 for warm sunset, and kind of a weird color. We're also gonna use lavender, which is the BV2. This is really great for shadowing yellows, believe it or not. Okay, so we're gonna start with the mellow yellow. What I really like to do is mark where I want my shadows to be first. Okay, so anywhere that your shadows would naturally occur, so like under Pikachu's chin, we're just going to go through and we're going to mark them. You're not going to see these lines when we're done. We're just kind of plotting out where we want shadows to be. Okay, so we would have them under his chin, definitely some under his ears, bottom of his ear over here. There's going to be a shadow under his hat. Okay, so there's going to be a pretty deep shadow underneath his arms here. And that shadow is going to wrap all the way around here. And I've got a little putty down here. I'm going to put a little shadow down here. Okay, Put a little shadow on this side of his neck, and then we'd have a shadow towards the bottom of our tail here. Okay. All right, so once you kind of map out where you want your shadows to be, you can go back and do some secondary shadows if you want ones that wouldn't be as pronounced, like at the bottoms of his lip. There'd be a little shadow there where his nose starts to slope back up. You know, just a couple places marked so we know where our darkest places are going to be. So again, you won't see these marks. They're really just so you know where you're going. When you get everything mapped out, we are going to put our mellow yellow into the color changing chamber. We're going to do the 15 to 20 seconds. We're going to start coloring it. I always usually put my light source on the top left. So we'd go light to dark from left to right. And I usually do it in sections. Now with the new movie coming up, he's a furry little guy. So we're going to put a base coat and then we're going to go through and we're going to add texture to it. So this can be messy for us. Okay. So we're going to start lighter. And I'm going to be kind of quick because we'll layer him up. This is just a little bit of a base. I like to go up and down just because I feel like it's easier to hide those lines than going across. But again, I also highlight from left to right, so kind of depends on what you're coloring. But for this guy, we're just going to have our lines go up and down. And again, this doesn't need to be the best thing in the world at this point. And by the time I make it over here to like the halfway point up on his face, I'm not really going to bother with lightening it with the color changing chamber. And I'm just going to do his face first, and then we'll come back and we'll work on the details and the rest of his body later. My nib's a little broken, so I'm not getting a super even coverage, but like I said, for what we're going to do, that's not really important. Okay. And we're going to fill in inside of the spyglass. I might be running low on ink with this pen. You may have to refill it. Okay, so we've got a base coat in the face. And I'm just going to set that upside down with the ink run to the bottom. Now with this Summer Sun, it's really, really bright yellow, so you don't need to use tons and tons of it. I'm going to use my brush nib and I'm going to go through it and I'm going to make strokes that are going to go up and down. And I'm starting from like the middle over because we're going to have this be our lightest section and he's going to gradually get darker. Because we're going for like a fur look. We don't want it to be super smooth. We want our lines to be kind of jagged, going in more than one direction, but mostly they're slanting down. Fur does not usually point up or straight out to the sides unless it's been electrocuted, which I guess could work for Pikachu. He is an electric Pokemon. But for right now, let's just assume that he is not got his electricity flowing. That way he looks smooth and fluffy. Now I'm going to create with my colors kind of a curve here for where his nose starts to bend up. So you can layer a little thicker there. We'll add more as we add other colors. I'm going to keep my strokes short and choppy. We can't really see too much of the fur pattern emerging yet, but as we continue to layer, we'll see more and more of that. Okay, so we're also going to assume that he's got some little cheekies here, more than just the red. There's probably a curve there, because in the original cartoons he was pretty fat. So I made the little curve like a rainbow. And then I'm going to pull down and just in that area. The rest of them we can keep doing like we were doing in the middle. Fur is a pretty slow process, if we're being honest. I've done it on a couple other drawings that I've done. It's a lot of layering and short, choppy little strokes. But the final product is definitely worth it. So now I'm going to switch to the warm summer sunset, which is quite a bit darker. We're going to start small and blend it in if we need to. So we're going to have a shadow here where we've got that little curve. I'm going to darken up the bottoms of his lip, and we're going to give him a little bottom lip, make him super cute. We'll put that kind of rainbow in. And then we would imagine that there would be a shadow from the spyglass. So we're just gonna really do that at the top and a little at the bottom. And then we're also gonna have some shadowing at the bottom and then kind of right towards the middle. Typically with round shapes, the shadow doesn't go all the way over to the right because if it's a round, it's curving back and you would see some light back here. So we're gonna have it close to the edge, but not all the way to the edge. Cat's trying to break down the door to get in here. She does not like it when I don't let her in. She'll be okay. She'll give up eventually. Okay, and then we also have the shadow under that. So I know this looks a little rough in the beginning, But with all the layering and the blending, this is one of those kind of have to have faith moments. That as you layer, it's going to turn to what we want. And if at first you don't succeed, you just keep layering it. The more you layer, the more colors will blend. And we'll get the shades and gradations that we're after. So I'm just going back in with the summer sun. And we're kind of toning this down a little bit. Okay, so I think I'm also going to go in with a little bit of fawn, which is the neutral 3, to add in some kind of in-between colors between that darkest color. Because this one's just slightly lighter. And we're going to start lightening stuff up with the color changing chamber so we can start getting layers of the darker color, because our yellow can only blend it so much. It will blend it. It's not going to blend it in a subtle way. It'll just soften the lines so they're not as harsh, which is helpful, but we want it to look like fur. So we need lots of different shades of color in here. So while that fawn is in the color changing chamber, I'm just taking my summer sun, we're toning some of those dark lines down a little bit. So we're starting to see a little bit more softness there in between the darkest color and the yellow. So this technique's definitely a lesson in patience. Or at least the way I do it is. So we're just gonna layer a lot. Now, you've probably noticed this color's still pretty light. We're going to come back and we're going to use different colors for that one because we don't want it to be as dark as the rest of him, or we're not going to get that kind of 3D dimension that we're after. I like to darken up around the eyes. Like I said, I'm a big fan of dimension and layering to help us achieve the desired effect. So I'm just kind of going to go back and forth between my fawn color and my summer sun, that bright yellow. My cat is super dramatic. You would think that it's tantamount to torture that she's locked out of the room that I'm in. So, I don't like a lot of videos with long pauses, and right now I'm just doing a lot of layering. So I'll talk to you a little bit about what I do. So I'm an artist at Wine and Canvas during the day. I teach painting classes to adults and children. I also go to conventions and sell artwork at conventions. I use markers pretty well exclusively for that. Sometimes I paint, but I really like to use the markers. Chameleon pens are definitely my favorite. That color changing chamber is amazing for what I do, because I do so much layering and color changing. A lot of times markers can give you a really flat result. This allows me to get way more dimension in my pieces. And my crazy cat, that's Nova. She's kind of a mommy's girl, in case you couldn't tell. So it's really starting to take quite a bit of shape. It's all about layering. The more you layer, the more you'll like it. And when in doubt, if you make something too dark, just keep blending it with your other colors. And one of the things that my art teacher always told me is that people are really afraid of shadows. So don't be afraid to make it darker, because honestly, we're going to add some darker shadows here in just a bit with that lavender color. I think lavender looks fantastic with yellow, the way those two colors mix. Just my opinion though. Now, the thing with the fawn color is because it is a skin tone, it gets this kind of weird shade to it. If there's not enough yellow under it, you don't get that kind of golden color that we're after as much. So I keep going back with this summer sun color and adding more of the bright yellow to give it kind of a base. That way it's a little softer and looks a little bit more cohesive. So now I'm going to go back in when I get to that point where I kind of like it, which is really where you want to stop, because nothing ruins something that's good quicker than trying to make it better. I say as I keep messing with it. Okay, so once you get to that point where you're happy with it, then we're going to go back through over in this lighter section, and we need to take that lighter color and do those short little lines. I'll switch to the bullet nib. It's a little easier to control. So once you get some of the basics in there, you can use the brush nib to layer some more back in there. So that side is definitely lighter, but I do want to add some of that summer sun in there. So we're going to lighten it up and then just throw a little bit in there. So we'll use that color changing chamber. A little bit. So again, I'm sure you're tired of hearing it by now, but it's really just about layering and going back and forth between the colors. Until you get the color and the texture that you want. So that's kind of our basic layering. And then we're going to go through, we're going to add some really dark shadows with the lavender color. You don't want as many of these because this is supposed to be your darkest shadow. And it still is going to follow the same, because even in the darker shadows, you would still have the fur pattern. So follow whatever you've already been doing. See, and you can't even really tell that it's purple. But I really like the way it layers with the yellow. That's why I like to use it. And then I'm just going to go back with some of my yellows and just touch up some spots. that I feel like could use it. We can also use the yellow to tone down the lavender anywhere we need to. Now, I've got a lot more shadow right in this section here, and I feel like you lose a little bit of the detail from the fur. So I'm going to put some more of that summer sun, and we're just going to be kind of delicate with it. We're not going to go crazy. Or warm sunset. Yeah, warm sunset. So really just anywhere you feel like needs a little bit of love and attention. Well, when you're trying to blend it, you don't have to do the short, choppy little strokes as much. When you're blending, an all-over pressure is fine. Now, I know parts of him look pretty dark, but we do have a lot of shadows in the face. We've got that lighter area, and that's all we really need. Okay, then I'm going to darken up with some more of that lavender, just like right underneath there. And if for some reason you feel like it's not getting dark enough for what you want, you could always go to the deep purple. The lavender usually does just fine, but you can. So at this point, we've got kind of fur in his face. So now we need to start putting some details in the rest of his face. So what I'm going to do, so his nose is going to be black. Okay, so I'm going to use the bullet nib. I'm just going to trace it. I'm going to leave a little bit at the top for a little highlight. And I like to highlight black with blue, so I'm going to put the cornflower blue in there. That way it's not all black. Okay, and then I'm also going to take my black, and I'm going to go inside of his mouth, just towards the top. So I've left a little sliver there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go in with some crimson red, so the RD4. We're going to go along the bottom. And then we're going to blend it into the black. So it looks like you can see just a little bit of his tongue peeking out. But it's kind of receding into the shadow of his mouth. Okay, super cute there. And then, so we've got his cheeks that are a red color. I'm going to mix together 2 red colors. So I'm going to use vermilion and crimson red. The vermilion's a little orangier, but the crimson red will get you a darker kind of shadow color. So we're going to shadow these 2. Okay, so I'm going to lighten it up a little bit, and we're going to still follow the fur pattern. And it's okay to go outside of the lines. It is fur after all. And then I always darken up just the very outside edge, because just like the shadow won't go all the way out to the edge, the highlight doesn't either. And then I've got a little bit sticking out down there. She doesn't give up, does she? So now that yellow doesn't look as dark when we start adding in those other colors. So like I said, don't be afraid to use your shadows and make things darker, especially as you start adding other colors in. Everything's gonna look really tied together, which is what we're after. So now we'll go in with a little bit of our, ooh, sorry, hit the stand. So we'll go in with a little bit of our crimson. I really like the way these 2 colors layer together. Spot there that I missed. Okay. So now we are ready to continue working on the rest of his body with that mellow yellow. But I'm almost out, so what we're going to do is we're going to refill. While I find the color. Alright, I have all of the color refills, so I have to go through all of them to find the one I need. Well, I know I have it, but I can't find it. So we're just gonna keep trucking then. So we'll start with the mellow yellow and we'll just go from there. If we run out, we run out. Because we don't use tons and tons of the mellow yellow anyway. Alrighty. Oh, look at that. Right on the floor. Okay, so since we do actually have the refill, it had just fallen. Then we will grab our syringe and we'll refill it. Okay, so these are really easy to refill. Well, I'm just not prepared. So to refill them, you just remove the nib. Okay. We're going to use our mellow yellow color in the syringe that comes in the pack. You fill it up to the 1 mark. Put it down inside of the pen. Squirt it. And you put the nib back in. So you can use a pair of tweezers, but if you use the bullet nib, you can also put it back in with your fingers and you don't have any trouble there. And then I clean out my syringes with rubbing alcohol so the ink doesn't get stuck in them. Okay. And then we can go right back to coloring. Sometimes it takes a minute to get all the way through the pen, but we can definitely get started in the meantime. Okay, so we're going to use the mellow yellow, which is the Y02. We're going to start coloring the ears. Now for these, since this ear is going from left to right, I'm going to do my strokes from left to right. And since my light source, like we talked about, is going to be up here, this top section of his ear is going to be my lightest part. Okay, so I've got a base color down. So since I just refilled this pen, I'm going to turn it upside down and let it sit a little bit while I keep coloring with some other colors to let the ink go all the way to the brush nib that I want. So then we're going to go back in with the summer sun, so the bright yellow. Now the rest of his body is not nearly as detailed, so it shouldn't take us quite as long. So a little bit of the summer sun will go in the top, but most of it is like halfway down. Then we'll take that warm sunset. I'm using the brush nib for this. I'm just using a really light pressure and kind of flicking my wrist up as I go. And then we'll layer in just a little bit of that fawn color to help us kind of blend between the darkest shade of yellow and the lighter one. So we got a little bit of that. And then we'll go back to our brighter yellow and kind of blend both of those in. Now with round objects, like we talked about before, highlight can't go all the way to the edge, so we need a little bit of that bright yellow there. So that way we've got our highlight and it looks a little bit more realistic. And then we'll throw our lavender at the very bottom to make our darkest shadow. So these parts go quite a bit quicker. Okay, so we'll go back to the mellow yellow. Now these pieces right here, they're going to be a dark like brown black. So we're not going to worry about them. Now if you accidentally go into them, brown and black will both cover yellow, so don't panic if you color more than you need to. You just don't have to. So since this ear's pointing up, we're going up and down. We'll go in with the fawn color again, just to help us blend a little bit. Now when you start working on two areas that you colored at different times, you may have to go back and forth between colors a little bit. Because we just did the face and we stopped before we really got into the ear, so that leaves kind of a weird area there. So this part will take a little bit more finessing to get the technique we want. So maybe a little bit of that color changing chamber so we can get some variation right through there. The fur was going in two different directions. So it's easier to soften that up with the color changing chamber. You get more than one shade, makes it a lot easier to blend things like that in. Lavender at the bottom for shadow. And like I said, I'm not going to go all the way out. I left a little gap that's a little lighter. I'm gonna use some of that mellow yellow. Oh, look at that. The ink has made its way to the bottom. So we've got more of the mellow yellow to work with now, which is great because this is an excellent blending color between all those yellows. We're going to pull this line in just a little bit more because right now it doesn't really look round. So if we pull the shadow in just a little bit, that'll help with that. So we're going to do that, and then we'll move on to the rest of his body. And then we'll do his little hat. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we're ready to move on. I'm going to do his little foot because I really don't have to do much to it. Same thing with his tail. Okay, so we can lighten up that mellow yellow a little bit. Yeah, that's coloring much better since we refilled it. Definitely low on ink. But that's okay. You got an extra little video there. Okay. So we've got our mellow yellow, and we're gonna do our summer sun. Remember, we can keep it messy. And I'm not going to do as many dark shadows in this, so I'm really just going to use the fawn. We don't need a lot of that dark sunset, warm summer sunset yellow. So I'm going to make it pretty dark right behind his little bum there, because that would cast a shadow all on its own. So now we can go in, I'm going to do like his arm section separate, and then we'll do his belly last. And then we've just got our spyglass, our hat, and then the tops of his ears. So I did that for opposite. I filled it in, and then we'll go in and put the highlights back in, because the highlight would be here and on the top of the hand anyway. Sometimes I get bored doing it all the same way. I switch it up a little bit. She's a ridiculous cat. She has not stopped yelling like the whole time she's been in there. Okay, so we've got the mellow yellow in that arm. Then we can go to the summer sun, so that brighter yellow. So we need a shadow under the chin. Ooh. And then each finger would get a shadow on the bottom. And then I'm gonna go back in with my mellow yellow and kind of blend those shadows in. I go back and forth a lot, so I kind of skip around. I apologize for that. Just when I see something, I'm like, ooh, we could do this different. That's what I do. So I'm going to keep going with my mellow yellow over to this side of his little body. He's looking pretty cute, if I do say so myself. Oh, we might have used all the ink that ran down. After we do this arm, we're going to set it back up and let the ink keep running down. Sometimes that happens if you refill it and then try to use it immediately after. The ink just doesn't have a chance to get all the way down to the nibs yet. So we can let it sit for a little bit. So we'll turn it upside down. We'll do this section, and then we can actually start on the ears and the eyeglass, and then we can come back and finish the rest of this once our ink has had a chance to drain down. So since our mellow yellow is out of commission for a minute, we'll do the summer sun next. areas in the fawn. I'm not going to use this dark sunset part too much through here because later I'm going to go in and I'm going to put it under the arms and stuff to create the darkest highlight. Or darkest shadow, I guess, not highlight. And try to make them uneven. Lines that are all perfectly the same really pull attention to your eye. I'm gonna layer these colors too. So like I went through with the fawn, did a layer of the bright summer sun over the top of it. Now we'll layer a little bit more fawn. So once again, we're using those layers to create depth for us. Lighter areas, darker areas. And then I'm going to use my lavender color. So there would be a dark shadow just here. And under the chin. She's ridiculous. She's trying to tear my door down. So we'll let that part be for a little bit while we're waiting in the middle of yellow. We can do the tops of our ears and we'll do the hat. Then we'll finish down here. So for the tops of the ears, I'm going to just do a dark brown. I'm not really going to use the color changing chamber super much for this. I'm just being really delicate with my strokes. So that's a little lighter towards the top. And again, we're going for fur, so it's okay if it's a little messy. You don't have to stick perfectly inside the lines. Okay, and then they're actually black, but like we talked about in the beginning, not a huge fan of plain black. So we're gonna take some of that plain black, we're gonna hug the very bottom, and then we'll go over it again with the brown, just to tone it down some. So we get that darkness without it being just plain black. Because I don't think that looks near as good. But everybody's different. If you just want to do it black and be truer to the original, that's fine. I won't judge you out loud. Okay, ears done. So for our hat, I've got a couple different colors that I've got in mind to use. I've got taupe. Let's see. We've got taupe, brown, taupe, fawn, bark, and burnt umber. We won't use a lot of the burnt umber though. So we'll use those basic 4 colors. This is a pretty textured hat too because he's got that classic detectives hat. So what we're gonna do, okay, so I think we'll start with fawn, or not fawn, sorry, taupe. So the darkest parts would be where his hat folds in. So these parts here, and then this would be pretty dark too, like this whole section. So we're just gonna fill that in. Okay, so this part right here is like the part of his hat that sticks straight out, and that's the top of that piece. So it'd be dark under here, and it would be dark here where these 2 pieces meet. Okay, so that's the basics for the hat, for the shadows anyway. So then we'll start using the color changing chamber. We're gonna do a base coat, and then we'll texture it just like we did with the fur. I'm gonna throw a little shadow up on this little circly bit too. So we're gonna shade light to dark from left to right, just like we did on our little guy here. I'm gonna go ahead and outline that a little bit. That way we've already got that edge a little darker where it wraps around, so it won't be super, super light on the outside edge. And then this is a little stark, so I'm going to soften this edge up a little bit. So a little softer. And again, if these aren't the smoothest colors for this part, really not a big deal, because we're just going to texture it anyway. We're going to do like a little check pattern. Didn't put it in long enough. Okay. So now I'm going to take my fawn color and we're going to darken up this back piece because this would be far away from our light source. I'm going to do the same thing with this part here in the middle. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the bullet nib, or well, no, before that, I'm going to go over this one more time. That darkens it up because the fawn color is kind of a pinky color. It is skin tone after all, or at least it comes in the skin tone pack. So it's got some peachiness to it. So we just went over where it was to darken it up. That way it definitely looks taupe because this hat is a brown. Okay, so I just futz with the details a lot. Okay, so once you get it basically done, then we're going to take our bullet nib and we're going to cross hatch. I'm going to be really delicate, not pushing down real hard. If the lines go all the way across, that's great. If they don't, that's fine. So like I'm going to do a section at a time. And then we'll go back the other way. So they're together, the two lines are making like little X's. Now, you're not going to do as many lines closest to where your highlights are. And then we'll do more lines closer to our shadows to create depth while we maintain our texture. Okay, so we still have that light to dark effect just by not putting as much texture on the left side. So I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm not pushing down really hard. I hear you, Nova. I'm almost done. We're going to do a little bit of that here at the bottom too. But since these pieces are connected, I'm going to treat it as one. Now we're going to throw some of that bark color in there too. It's going to look pretty dark, but we'll go over it with the taupe. Okay, so I go right down our seams. And throw a little back in here. And we'll do some of that cross hatching, making those little X's. I really like the bullet nib for small details, but sometimes it runs through all the ink quicker and needs a chance to recharge. So sometimes if I feel confident that I can be really delicate, I'll use the brush nib instead. Or you can just give your marker a break. Just like you, sometimes it needs one. Just for the ink to go back to where it was supposed to be. So I'm also going to use this brown, so there would be a shadow down here. That would be the darkest shadow there. There would also be one here. And there'd be a pretty hefty one right here. And there would be a small one right under that line there. Now, I did a lot of lighting studies when I took a bunch of art classes when I was in high school and everything. If you didn't, don't worry. as long as you decide which side you want the light source to be on, if you don't get every little shadow exactly, nobody's going to come and look at your picture and be like, oh, you have a shadow somewhere, there shouldn't be one, or you're missing a shadow here. If they do, maybe you don't need those people looking at your artwork anymore. Because the best part about artwork is really just having a good time. And then I'm just going to go in with my burnt umber to finish the hat. And we're going to put our darkest line back in. Just to get a little bit more depth. Okay. So then we're going to go back to our mellow yellow to finish. Oh yeah, see, you just needed some time. Because we've just got our arm and our belly left. And then the spyglass, and we'll be all done. Okay. Oh, didn't give it quite enough time. Okay. So we'll do the arm, give this a bit more time. After the arm, we can even go right to the magnifying glass. So we'll keep that sitting upside down. We'll go to that bright summer sun. Highlight the bottom of the fingers. Fawn along the bottom and the bottom of the fingers, and then he's got some fold on that arm, so they would get some shadows too. So let's go ahead and do spyglass. So I'm going to do it black for the bottom. So I'm going to leave a little edge just like we did in his nose. This is kind of a small spot, so we're going to go bullet nib. I got it between the fingers. I lost the fingers a little bit, so I'm gonna put them back in. Then we're going to go back to our cornflower blue, put that shadow in. Now I'm still going to use the black for the top piece. I'm just going to use quite a bit of the blender so I get more of a gray color. It started to get kind of dark, so we'll go back to the color changing chamber for a minute. Almost done. We'll hit it with a little bit of this black around the edges. Spot right there that's still a little yellow. We'll hit it one more time. I know, Nova. I'm almost done. Hang on. Hang on. Sometimes I swear they're worse than kids. So now we're going back to our mellow yellow and we're going to fill in our belly. I know it. You're so abused. You can't come ruin videos, but you're still trying. Okay, so it's a little shoddy right through there. That's okay. I really haven't given it adequate time to sink into the nibs, but that's okay. Because we really just need the lighter section to be right over in here. So after we get the mellow yellow, we go back to Summer Sun. Hit it with a little on the left, nothing crazy. And then we're gonna hit it a lot harder towards the middle. Just kind of going up and down. Ooh, I had a little bit of ink on the table. Okay, so once we get the yellow, we just have to shadow his belly and we are all done. So for the shadow, we're going to use that fawn color. We need some shadows underneath the spyglass and under his arm. We'll put a darker one with lavender in just a second. And then we're gonna start shadowing coming from there, following like a curved line, like parentheses almost. Because he seems fat. Straight lines will make him look skinny. Rounded lines will make him look fat. And everybody loves a chunky Pikachu. Try to cover that green up a little bit where we pulled some of the blue ink off of my table. Didn't realize I had blue ink on my table, so because you can tell it's super clean. I use it to paint and to color here, so sometimes the colors do get a little messy. Almost done, Bobo. Yes, I know. You're so abused. Okay, go back in with Summer Sun. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to Mellow Yellow for a minute. It's had a second. So we're going to blend in these middle pieces where it was really bright yellow. And we just don't need it to be quite that bright. The Mellow Yellow is great for blending. That way we can hit it with our darkest shadow. So that means lavender. Lavender is going to go right under. Oh, I grabbed the cornflower. Although that, I mean, it does work. So right under. There we go. Right under our spyglass, under the arm. Add a little bit of darkness over in here. I'll pull this down a little bit and then we'll layer it with just a little bit more fawn. So the colors blend a little bit. Because we want it to look like a shadow on fur. I'm going to hit it with Summer Sun one more time, just to help kind of fade those lines a little bit. That maybe stood out a little more than we wanted. Just by kind of hitting it a little hard there. And look at that, we have a little detective ready to investigate lots of crime and nefarious deeds. So thank you guys for coloring with me. At this point, if you wanted to, you could take one of those white gel pens and add some brighter highlights here and there if you wanted to, but that's totally optional. So thank you guys again for painting with me, or coloring with me today, and I look forward to coloring with you again soon. Have a great day.